this is the last formal session of our 2-week Summer Institute dealing with critical anti-Semitism studies. So for the new people here, welcome and thank you for coming. As you know, I'm sitting with two giants. I'm humbled to be sitting with both Dr. Benjamin Chavis and Natan Sharansky. I'll introduce them briefly. They're going to be speaking. The name of this session is A Tale of Two Movements: Civil Rights, Soviet Jewry, and the Ongoing Struggle Against Hatred. Dr. Chavis is actually now on the faculty of ISGAP. He's also not at such another institution that's not as prestigious as ISGAP, called Duke University. He's also a professor there. He's very much engaged in African American and Jewish relations and solidarity. I came to know him through Senator Lieberman and a colleague of Senator Lieberman, and the fine work that they were doing together. Dr. Chavis is the former head of the NAACP and a civil rights activist. He is very close to Dr. Martin Luther King. Some of you may have heard of the Wilmington 10. It was a horrible part of the civil rights struggle where people were falsely imprisoned. Dr. Chavis was actually sentenced to 34 years in prison, served 7, and then was exonerated, and the sentences overturned. While he was in prison, he received a master's degree from Duke University from the School of Divinity. So he has a special place in their history and in the history of the civil rights movement. Natan Sharansky, as many of you know here, he's the chair of ISGAP, which is a profound honor for us at ISGAP. He was the voice of the Refusnik movement, a movement that demanded dignity in the Soviet Union, to live freely as Jewish people, to be able to practice their Jewish culture, and to emigrate to Israel if they decided or if they wanted to. And as many of you know, the Soviet Jews, the Refusniks, the people who demanded this sort of basic human, decent respect, were imprisoned, had to go underground, lost their jobs. In the Soviet Union at the time, if you weren't working, you were considered a parasite, and that led to incarceration. It was a very difficult time. Natan spent 9 years in the Soviet Gulag. He was on hunger strikes. They were both of these gentlemen were on hunger strikes. He was finally released and made Aliyah to Israel as a free Jewish man. And really, his freedom, his release really encaptured the entire Jewish world. It was really something that resonated profoundly for the Jewish people in Israel and in the diaspora. He served 9 years in the Israeli government in various positions, and then 9 years in the Sachnut, so which is not bad for us. We have another 6 or 7 years to go at ISGAP, so that's right. So it's really an honor for both of them to be here. And I will say, as a scholar, I'm just going to stay for a moment, it's especially grateful to be in the presence of these two heroes. I was raised by parents that really taught my sister and I the value of human dignity, of standing up as a proud Jewish person, and also standing up for the rights of other people. And they really gave us a serious education in aspects of civil rights. We were very aware of the condition of African Americans as children, visiting family in the United States from Canada. And they were also at the forefront. I used to go for Soviet Jewry demonstrations with my grandparents and their friends, and my parents and their friends, and my sister and our friends. So very much committed to human rights. So, and I was the student, the chairperson of the student struggle for Soviet Jewry in Canada. And as a kid, a naive kid with not too much fear, I spent 3.5 weeks in Moscow and Leningrad at the time with a friend, Stephen Singerman, visiting the Refusnik community and bringing them messages from outside and assistance, and then bringing back messages. And at the time, I had the amazing fortune to meet many Refusniks, including Natan's brother and mother, who came in. They were in internal exile, came in to meet us in Moscow. And then I was also, I think from that experience, ended up being very active in the anti-apartheid movement. I became the chairperson of the African National Congress Solidarity Committee and went to South Africa as well. And I was sort of involved in that struggle in the 80s and 90s. So to sit with these two incredible people, it's really a special honor. So on that note, I will turn the microphone on to you, Dr. Chavis.
Thank you. God answers prayers, but you have to pray. And so being here at ISGAP Summer Institute over the last 2 weeks has been a great honor, a great privilege, and I would say somewhat a great responsibility. Because after this Summer Institute, we have to go back to our places to make sure that we not only challenge anti-Semitism, challenge anti-Zionism, but to end it, to stop it, to put it down. I sit between two. I think Charles is being very modest. Before I really get into what I want to say, I think we should all give Dr. Charles Small a round of applause for this great Summer Institute. And all of the staff who worked so hard to make this possible. Sitting next to my brother here, and I don't use the term brother as casual identification. We became brothers in the 1970s while we both were in prison. I became a refused Nick. He became a champion of civil rights. What we discovered was that our struggles were reflective of one movement for freedom, one movement for justice, one movement for equality. Some people think that anti-Semitism will be ended if the Jewish people stand up stronger. I think anti-Semitism will be ended when the whole world stands up and demand that this evil be stopped, be challenged. I got inspired by, I knew him then as Natan Sharansky. When I read about what he was doing in the Soviet jail, prison, I said, I better get busy and start writing also. And I wrote a letter to my brother Sharansky on September 4th, 1978. The prison authorities in Moscow refused to give him the letter. And I was working with Tish Basil, my trusted associate in the Black Jewish Action Alliance. I found at the bottom of a pasteboard box a 50-year-old letter. And he never got a chance to receive it. So part of my address, if you don't mind, I'm going to read him the letter that I sent him 50 years ago. And I would like to share, with your permission, Natan, the letter with everybody just as a tidbit of remembrance of this day. McCain State Prison, McCain, North Carolina, September 4th, 1978. Dear Anatoly B. Sharansky, please receive this letter out of my utmost respect for you and the global cause for freedom, justice, and equality. Anti-Semitism is an outrage to humanity. Racism and anti-Semitism are crimes against humanity. As you have now been unjustly sentenced to 13 years imprisonment in Moscow, I welcome you to the international fraternity of prisoners of conscience, who all are political prisoners. I am currently unjustly serving a 34-year prison sentence in the United States of America as a member of the Wilmington 10 in my home state of North Carolina. I have read with great admiration of your courage and commitment to end the treacherous treatment and oppression of Jews in the Soviet Union. The religious, ethnic, social, and political discrimination against Jews and the persecution of Jewish families and communities are evil affronts to the love and grace of God. Likewise, the racial, ethnic, social, and political discrimination against and persecution of African Americans, families, and communities are also affronts to the evil affronts to the love and grace of God. I pray for your freedom and liberation. I extend to you on behalf of my colleagues who are political prisoners in America and known as the Wilmington 10, our profound solidarity to you and to all of our Jewish sisters and brothers in the Soviet Union. One day in the future, the prison doors will open up and our chains will all fall off. In the meantime, let's keep the faith and build an international movement to end antisemitism and racism throughout the world. As Abraham declared centuries ago, I'm a country preacher, so I have to quote some scripture. As Abraham declared centuries ago in Genesis 14 through 16, when he learned that his relative had been taken captive, Abraham called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan, unquote. Abraham's actions to liberate Lot and others from captivity was an early biblical example of taking a stand against unjust discrimination and imprisonment and captivity. I recall in the early 1960s, when I worked as a young statewide youth coordinator in North Carolina for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As a result of this work, there was an unbreakable bond and solidarity between Dr. King and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. I also remember months before the historic and transformative March on Washington in August of 1963, Rabbi Heschel emphasized, quote, "Racism is man's greatest threat to humanity, the maximum of hatred for a minimum of reason," unquote. Rabbi Heschel condemned racism as a moral and theological evil that linked Black and Jewish struggles for righteousness, justice, freedom, and equality. In a speech to the American Jewish Congress in 1965 in New York, 3 years before Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, Dr. King proclaimed, quote, "The Negroes are not the only people who have suffered. The Jews went through the horrors of oppression, and more than any other people, the Jewish people understand the depths of tragic suffering. And it has been the Jewish people who have stood beside us in the struggle for freedom," unquote, Dr. King. Both Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel worked closely together to fight against antisemitism and racism. Today, our brother Anatoly, we have to strive. I'm saying that Anatoly and I have to strive together to continue to work, to speak out together from our prison cells, and to one day march together, and eventually to triumph together over the evil forces of anti-Semitism and racism in the Soviet Union, in America, and throughout the world. In closing, my faith enables me to be optimistic and not pessimistic. Both of us are refusing to serve time, but we are making time serve the worldwide freedom movement and together to affirm the oneness of our humanity. Please forgive the length of this letter. Writing to you is therapeutic and a special blessing from God. I pray, Anatoly, that the prison authorities there will permit you to receive this letter. God bless you. The struggle continues. A lucha continua. Sincerely, Benjamin F. Chavis Jr.
Thank you. Thank you again.
So I think that's my keynote speech.
Great. Great. Well, when Charles giving his compliments about historical, I always feel ironic about it, dismiss it, but that's really historic. I never received a letter 50 years later. I knew from you that you wrote in a letter, but I never heard. Of course I did. There are people until this day who meet me and say, oh, you know that when I was in school, we wrote letters to you. Did you receive our letters from Toronto? And I always tell them, frankly, that I didn't receive any letters in prison. But KGB received, and that was important because KGB knew that the world cares, and that's what saved us. So the fact that that's probably immediately after my last speech in the court, and the sentence after this, you wrote like a month, that the KGB knew that not only President Carter made the statement, and not only some politicians, but Jews of all the world and our strong supporters, that's very important. So, first of all, thank you. And really, I never received a letter 50 years later, so it's good. Second, look, I have to say that when I asked for the title, A Tale of Two Movements, I meant to speak, and I will be speaking about comparing the movement of struggle for Soviet Jewry and today's antisemitism.
Hold it up a little closer.
Yeah. So I'll go to this, but because of Benjamin's surprise, I want to say that really these movements were very close, and that in 1975, I met Jack Greenberg, who was the lawyer of Martin Luther King and who won a lot of cases on human rights. And he came to Moscow as a tourist, of course, they couldn't come differently, together with Judge Diamond Keith from Detroit, who later became the Supreme Court of Labor in America, and who was the representative of African American community. And they were telling the stories about busing in Atlanta and how they were marching, and it was so important for us. And so many people joined this movement straight from the human rights movement. And I already was wearing this cap, which I was told it's the soldiers in Israel have it. And Diamond said that he likes my hat, so I gave it to him. I hope they'll get another from Israel. And 10 years later, when I served 9 years in prison, then even 11 years later, and then came to Detroit, we had a picture with this hat, because he said that he was saving it because it was reminding him that the struggle for human rights is not finished, that it continues. So really, it was a lot of sympathy and a lot of mutual effort in our struggles. Now, coming to the topic that I wanted to discuss, because I'm sure for this, by the way, the good thing is There is good news and bad news. Good news is that the number of the participants in the seminar goes up every year. The bad news is the number of anti-Semites goes much quicker, exponential. Yeah. So we really, and the only way we can stop it is to make sure that not only new anti-Semitic courses, in every university, every year there are new anti-Semitic courses. And believe me, I was practically 100 universities. Since the war started, I was 9 times in universities. And I know how awful it is. And that's why it is so important that there will be courses on anti-Semitism in the universities, because in fact, people are thirsty to hear the other side, the truth, and they almost were deprived of this. So that's why the seminars are important. Now, you heard a lot about our external challenges in our struggle against anti-Semitism. I want to speak a little bit about internal challenges for us. So there were many moments in which Jews, American Jews, were involved, but only twice they really came in big numbers, in hundreds of thousands, to Washington, and that's one about Soviet Jewry, one about antisemitism. So the first demonstration was on the 7th of December 1987. 250,000 Jews came to Washington the day when Gorbachev, the Soviet leader, came there to make a statement. And I, of course, felt personal satisfaction because the moment I went out of the prison a year before, I was speaking that hundreds of thousands of American Jews have to come when Gorbachev will come. I was the first political prisoner released by Gorbachev, but there was still a lot to do. And many Jewish leaders were very skeptical. They were saying, in winter, hundreds of thousands of Jews, what you're talking about, maybe 10, maybe 15,000. And during the detente, is it good to irritate the Soviet leaders, whether Reagan will be happy? In the end, when you go to the grassroots, you see, everybody wanted, because it was like 25 years of the struggle. They were struggling when they were young, and now they continue to struggle. The 25 years they were going to the Soviet Union as tourists to bring us information, take from us information. They were demonstrating, they were twinning bar mitzvahs, they were lobbying in the, vis-a-vis practically every American president. And now everybody feels that is the last battle, because Gorbachev is already retreating. And so they came with a lot of enthusiasm. And in fact, they were right, because a year later, all the refusings were out. 2 years later, Berlin Wall fell. 4 years later, Soviet Union stopped existing, and 1 million Jews moved to Israel, another 500,000 to America. But we didn't know yet. But we felt that that is the moment, the last act of the struggle. Now we can read archives of White House. And so now you can read how next day, Gorbachev came in the town, that's Sunday, on the Monday become official negotiations. And President Reagan starts from this. He says, Mr. President, Mr. Gorbachev, I don't remember his title, was still, I think, Secretary of the Communist Party, General Secretary. So, of course, we'll go to our agenda. We have a lot of important questions. But first, I want to tell you, if you notice, hundreds of thousands, there were 250,000 Jews who were demonstrating yesterday, and you see it as a very important issue. And Gorbachev said, yeah, we took it, we noticed, we took it into account. So he really responded as a new type of the leader, that we are going to do something. But then he went back to the classical role of Soviets and said, but you also have your violations of human rights. Don't you have sometimes anti-Semitic incidents? Well, for Reagan it was very easy to dismiss it, because everybody who has complaints can go to the court, we are a free country and so on. The irony is that who could then say, who could see the future and say that the next big demonstration of American Jews here in the mall, exactly with the same number, 250,000, will be in 2023. And it all will be about anti-Semitism in America. So that is the irony. That then it was like a stupid Soviet joke That, well, we have our problems not letting Soviet Jews go, but you also can have problems. And of course, President Reagan easily dismissed it. But really, the next time that hundreds of thousands of American Jews came, they came because of the anti-Semitism, because of what's happening in the university. Because the biggest pogrom in modern Jewish history was welcomed in universities at the beginning of liberation, and so on. And so it is so natural for American Jews to repeat the success of Soviet Jewry movement. And I hear again, there are seminars about it. Why can't we unite in the same way and to fight in the same way and to lobby in the same way and to teach in the same way as we did with Soviet Jewry? Because it's, in both cases, it's like takes us back to history, takes us back to our identity, to the feeling of solidarity, and we feel that we are speaking about the future of our people, and we build relations with many friends. Why we cannot do it now? So I'll give 3 reasons which make it different. Yeah? You didn't hear me start from the beginning?
Yeah.
Now we got it.
Yeah. You also got it there? Yeah, okay. First is, it was very clear, it was very easy to define the aim of the war. Here is totalitarian empire, who's keeping their people in prison. There is a real iron curtain. And we have to destroy this iron curtain. And that was our desire in the Soviet Union, and that was the desire of those who supported us. It is much more, and there were many organizations, I didn't say it, but there were many organizations which disagree with one another, fought one another, Conference on Soviet Jewry, Council on Soviet Jewry, Coalition on Soviet Jewry, Student Struggle on Soviet Jewry. There were many different organizations who didn't like one another. It's Jewish after all. But they all could agree about the aim, and that's why they acted together. With anti-Semitism, we cannot even agree on the formula, because it's so difficult for many people to accept that anti-Zionism, but Martin Luther King, by the way, accepted immediately, that anti-Zionism, in the end, at least in some of its forms, turns into anti-Semitism. I proposed 20 years ago 3D principle: demonization, delegitimization, double standard. What makes connection between these two? Later, the international definition, IRA definition, made it in terms of, in the form of examples. But everybody who wants to see this connection can see it. And there is international definition. You know how many groups, Jewish groups, say that they cannot accept it because it will restrict the freedom of speech. It was really funny almost. At the day when America signed with Bahrain agreement to fight anti-Semitism based on the international formula, when they got this information from the State Department, and that very day, one of the respectable San Francisco Jewish organizations made decision that we cannot accept international definition because it can restrict the freedom of speech. So the moment you cannot agree what you're fighting for, there is almost no opportunity to work together. I'll give you one example from the Soviet Jewry. There were many conflicts and many debates. One of them, which is appropriate for this, was where these Jews who get permission should go, to Israel or to any other place. And the thing is that then there was no way, there was no freedom of migration, only reunification of families. So the only thing is through so-called reunification of families in Israel. And so people went to Vienna because there were no diplomatic relations. And on their way, there were American organizations who were saying, maybe you want to come to America. And if they say yes, they were taken. Israel was furious about it because Israel did so much. Israel was keeping contact when nobody could in the worst years. We organized, orchestrated all the campaign. I'm sure that when Charles went to Soviet Union, somebody from Israel was talking to him and was preparing him. So, and here this diaspora is stealing Jews from us. That was, on the other hand, there were people like me who were Zionists, but we're saying there is freedom of choice. And there were organizations who were insisting on Zionism, organizations who were insisting on freedom of church. And at some moment they were decisions, we so much disagree, maybe everybody will fight for this and for this. And what happened? It became clear immediately. If you take Shalach et Ami, let my people go from this, if you take this historical feeling that we are fighting for new exodus, you're taking away all the passion. On the other hand, if you're taking away this human rights aspect, you're losing the opportunity to unite our forces with all the world. And so it was decided, in fact, that, okay, we disagree, but we are fighting together to break the Iron Curtain. Then we will start debating with one another. The same type of agreement theoretically could be here, but you cannot fight anti-Semitism in one form and not to fight in the other, because it will move immediately from one form to the other. You have to unite your forces and to fight together based on one definition. So that's first reason why it is so difficult. Second reason, for everybody with different organizations, it was clear what is the reason, who has to be blamed. That it is Soviet Union's totalitarian nature, monopoly on the controlling the life of the people, who have to be blamed. Here, what we have today, and some people don't realize to what extent it's divided. There are, well, from the times of Herzl was genius. He predicted the Israel state, but he also said that the moment, is it better, that the moment all the Jews will be in Israel, there will be no anti-Semitism. Why there should be anti-Semitism? Or they come to Israel, they assimilate, there will be no anti-Semitism. And so, well, of course, everybody knows it's not true, but I have to say, and I was in the government, and the moment there is another anti-Semitic accident, or somewhere in France, or whatever, immediately voices. But why they are there? We have anti-Semitism because they are there. If they'll come to Israel, there will be no anti-Semitism. On the other hand, we have a lot of Jews in diaspora who are saying anti-Semitism is because of the policy of the Israeli government. If only Israeli government didn't do this or didn't do this, there would be no anti-Semitism, or at least there would be much less anti-Semitism. There are Jews who believe that Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Jews, are irritating people so much that they are the source of anti-Semitism. There are very religious people who believe that Reformed are trying to enter by force non-Jewish vote so strong that that's what happened in Germany. That's why Germans became so irritated. And of course political. There are people on the left who strongly believe that it is because of the right, and people on the right who strongly believe that it's people on the left. Maybe you remember this debate between Biden and Trump, I think in the previous campaign, where on TV debate, one was saying that all the anti-Semitism on the right, and it's because of these Proud Boys, and the other was saying, no, all the anti-Semitism on the left, because Antifa. And so the fight with anti-Semitism turns into the fight of left against right. So I have to, you understand, I'm Zionist, so I don't want Jews to live in Israel. And I have a lot of disagreements sometimes with my government, so I can agree with some of the criticism. But the reason for anti-Semitism is the longest existing hatred towards Jews in the times of antique times and Christian times, in National Socialist times, in Bolshevik times, everywhere. And to bring it down, disagreements political or about better identity, is to make it much smaller and to make it absolutely impossible to unite our efforts. So what's really happening? That the left is fighting anti-Semitism on the right, which they have no influence on the right, because that's like electoral campaign. And the right is fighting anti-Semitism on the left. In Soviet Jewry movement, it was absolutely opposite. We had a very strong Jewish lobby in Democratic Party who were dealing with Carter and who were pushing that he will fight for the freedom of prisoners. And we had very strong Jewish lobby in the right who was pressing on Nixon in order he will agree with Jackson Amendment, which was a proposal by Democrat Jackson, and it was important for us. So everybody was fighting in their own camp, and that's why it was effective. And that's something that almost doesn't exist. And today when we find out, well, when the war was such a big danger, the only people who were fighting anti-Semitism in the war were people on the right. Now that we can see how anti-Semitism on the right becomes threat again, but mainly you can see it, hear it all the time on the left. So that is another reason why it is so difficult. And the third, well, there are maybe other reasons, but I'll make the thing. The third is that in those days, there was a love story between our movement and human rights movement. Real love story. Well, yes. Thank you for your letter, but we had this love and cooperation all the time. Today, so-called human rights movement is in love story with antisemitism. And I'll give one example how it happened. You know, Human Rights Watch, yeah? Problematic organization, very problematic. How it was created? In 1976, we, Soviet dissidents, created Helsinki Watch. In 1975, it was Helsinki Agreement. 1976, we, all types of dissidents, Jewish dissidents, Ukrainian dissidents, Armenian dissidents, human rights activists. My teacher, Andrei Sakharov, was called human rights in general. We were in 1911, people established Human Rights Watch. It was called Helsinki Watch. In 1 year, we were all arrested, but it's changed the world. This time, they were already committed. Our documents, which were published about human rights, became the main documents by which the world judged Soviet. Bob Bernstein, the head of Random House, came as a tourist, like Charles, and met with us. And he met with us. I took him to Sakharov, who was very impressed. And when he went back to America, he created Helsinki Watch. Helsinki Watch, and the idea of this was to empower the voices of people who are fighting for freedom in dictatorship. They don't have their human rights, they don't have lawyers. The world doesn't know about them. And we have to amplify these voices. That was the idea. And it became a very respectable organization which fought for us dissidents in the Soviet Union, then for dissidents in China. 25 years ago, he was chairman and then honorary president. He resigned. He resigned because he said, now it's a very different organization. Now it's an organization which, instead of amplifying voices of those who are in dictatorship, they're taking political stand on things. And the number of reports on, and it's changed its name from Helsinki Watch to Human Rights Watch. The number of reports on human rights violations in Israel is by far bigger than all the reports of Human Rights Watch on Syria and all the other dictators in that area. And so he resigned, because he said now it has nothing to do with the real struggle for human rights. But that's what happened in general. And because every Jew is proud of the struggle for human rights. Everybody wants to be connected with human rights. The fact that organizations speaking in the name of human rights are so much anti-Israel. In fact, by our criteria, double standard, it's anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic, let's make it much more difficult. So having said all this, I have to say that those organizations, those people who recognize that there must be one definition for all the types of Jewish identity, who recognize that we have to fight anti-Semitism in our own camp, first of all, and who recognize that we have to take the ban of human rights from the anti-Semites. And they can work together. And still it is, in fact, it is the majority of the organization of Jews. And then we together can have an effective lobby in Washington and we have effective demonstrations together, and we have lectures in the universities, not in the name of left or right, but based on really principles of human rights, and that should be our aim. Thank you.
So thank you both very much. So we have some time for Q&A. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask?
How did you have such a pristine letter for yourself because you sent him a letter in prison? How did that work?
Yeah. Well, first I had to sneak the letter out of prison because they were monitoring all of my letters. I'm sure that the letter to Natan was probably stopped by the KGB and the CIA. All my letters to Angela Davis never made their way out of the prison. So, when my family visited, I gave them the letter. I don't want to break rules, but I needed to get the letter out of the prison. And that's how it wound up, the original in the box. Because I always, in prison, make 2 copies of everything. That was my diary. I want to say something about Helsinki, human rights. While I was at McCain State Prison, I also wrote an appeal to Helsinki. And you're right, Helsinki at the time was an international agreement to define and to defend human rights for all people. But over the years, some of the organizations that claim to be human rights organizations, as you said, Natan, became political. And now some of those organizations are the biggest critics of not only Israel, but they're critics of certain African nations. I think criticism is very important if it leads to something productive. But criticism for just the sake of being a critic, I think is dysfunctional and non-productive. So what I'm hoping is that we need to broaden the Refuse-Nick movement. We need to broaden and we need to take the human rights movement out of the hands of those who really are causing more confusion than there are clarity. So that's my limited response.
Thank you both for an amazing talk that I'm sure most of us will remember for the rest of our lives. One question I have is, when we're engaging in activism and we face people on our side of the aisle, as Natan spoke about, who for maybe very genuinely held reasons, even if they're misguided, disagree with us and with coalescing around a definition, for instance, for reasons of strategy. How do you think we should try and get through to them based on your experience? And I'm sure the civil rights movement had similar problems. So I'd love to hear just if there's any anecdotes you have from your extensive experience on that.
Well, my experience was different because we were facing totalitarian regime. So we didn't have really people who were arguing with us. People who were using the power of the state to disagree with us and to put us in prison. That's why we had to appeal to the people abroad. And that was like my role, to connect our voice with the people abroad. And of course, sometimes to bring a letter to Senator Jackson from Soviet Union, from 100 refuseniks, takes months, first of all, to collect 100 signatures secretly. And then that some of the tourists should smuggle it. And only then, through Voice of America, could hear that Senator Jackson received it. So we really didn't have the argument with people inside Soviet, but we did have a lot of discussions and some arguments with those who were coming, because they were coming from different organizations. Look, you have to use all the reasonable arguments about definition. You have to know how to show that it's not restricting the freedom of speech. I can tell you with my students, I was saying, okay, think about something that you really hate in Israeli politics. And now try to express it, your disagreement, without demonization of Israel, without denial of the right of Israel to exist, and without applying double standards which you are not applying to any other country. And you know what? They made a big effort and they usually succeeded. So you can say the same criticism without delegitimizing Israel. By this you are proving that there is no restriction of the freedom of speech. Simply, here are the borders. When you are crossing these borders, you are anti-Semite. So with the friends or with the rational opponents, you have to use logic. There is no. But you have also to understand that here today, with the struggle against Israel, there are many ideological enemies. And who really believe that we are oppressors and they are oppressed, and so we should have no voice, and they should have all the. It's Bolshevism in its pure expression. Simply you replace the word class with the word race, and you get exactly Bolshevism translated into what we want today. So with those who are ideological enemies, you have to fight through fighting for public opinion. But yeah, first of all, you have, and I saw it again and again, there are many people who are confused, who feel, no, we are really for the better world, for human rights, so we cannot be with you. And you have to know how to show it, that you're wrong.
I agree with what Natan just said.
Good answer.
Long letter and short answer.
So go on.
So thank you first of all for this very important talk. It was very touching. Within the cultural DNA of African Americans, there's the notion of justice for all. And within the cultural DNA of Jews, there's tikkun olam. So I'm wondering, when you talk about reclaiming the banner of human rights, beyond the UN, beyond lobbying the political establishment, what does that look like on the interpersonal level, reclaiming that alliance between communities?
Thank you, that's very important. Timely question. I believe in Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, he presented this concept of the beloved community, which is inclusive of all humanity. I think the way you reclaim human rights, the way you reclaim the inner commitment of the African American community and the Jewish community is you don't start at the top of these international organizations. You build it at the community level. One of the things that we're finding out with the Black Jewish Action Alliance, there are a lot of good people in all these cities, but they are working in isolation of the community. And what we're trying to do is to form a network of local groups who believe not only in the importance of solidarity between blacks and Jews, but helping us. I think one of the things Natan said, you have to be clear definitively of what we're doing. I think you, early in this seminar, I said, the antidote to hate is love. Okay, so how do we love one another? How do we respect one another? How do we claim and defend even the oneness of our humanity? I see everybody here as part of one human family. In my view, there's only one race. That's the human race. In fact, race itself, as you heard me say in other settings, was a concoction. You know, there's no scientific, and I would say no theological justification for racial categories. You know, if you believe in the oneness of humanity, that means we're all part of one human family. You don't start by asking a person, oh, what is your race? What is your skin color? What is your language? Where were you born? And where are you now? If you start there with the divisiveness, then it prevents us from finding ways how to love one another. That doesn't mean you have to give up your identity. That does not mean you have to give up your beliefs. But I think that we need to rebuild I would say a worldwide, not just in America, not just in Israel, but a worldwide movement. I think one of the great characteristics of this Summer Institute has been its diversity from all over the world. You know, and I think that's so important because if you read the mainstream media, you would think that the whole world is against Israel, or the whole world is against the empowerment of people of color because of their skin color. And I think those fears and those phobias and those stereotypes are out there, but we overcome those stereotypes, we overcome those stigmas by exhibiting not only what we say, but what we do together, how we live together, how we work together, how we march together. The March on Washington in 1963 would not have been possible without support of the Jewish community. Most people don't know that the NAACP was initially started by Jews and blacks. You know, so we have to learn our history. I think one of the last point, what prevents what you're calling for is that we live in a world that has become ahistorical. We live in a world that has become residents about looking at the past. I think we should learn from the past. But I don't believe we should ever ignore the past. And one of the reasons it gives rise to antisemitism today is the failure of history, the failure of the understanding of the depths of Nazism, the depths of anti-Semitism. And I'll even go back to biblical times. You know, I think that we need to do a lot of work. That's why interdisciplinary studies are so important. No one discipline is going to solve this matter. So I'm calling on whether you're in the applied science world or the social science world, we ought to be working together to build the beloved community, to build a oneness of humanity, human rights movement.
No, I agree fully. Also, one interesting fact, because of Martin Luther King's march on Washington, there had to be a lot of preparations in Washington. The headquarters of this march were at the center of the Reformed Jewish movement.
That's right.
Yeah.
So thank you. So I'm going to ask one final question, and we're running low on time. So I'm sitting next to two giants of human rights, and you both sacrificed a lot. You both gave a lot to the struggle for human decency, for your communities, and for humanity. Natan, you spoke about the sacrifice that young Israelis made in the last 2 years. That should never be underestimated. I think it's profound. Gilad spoke about the divisions, and they exist. But as you said, the entire country came together and sacrificed in a profound way. So my question to you is, we live in a society and a time when I think people are predisposed to be a bit more individualistic. They spend a lot of time in social media, fragmented, even away from their families. Families are also in a different position than they were a generation ago. What's your message to young people, African Americans, Jews in the diaspora, at this time of an emergency, the explosion of anti-democratic values, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, racism? What's your message to young people? What are they obligated to sacrifice? If so, how can they contribute?
No, you start.
Thank you. As I mentioned, the reason why I'm optimistic is because of young people. It does not mean that everybody should desire to sacrifice the way other people have sacrificed. I think when someone sacrifices, you should learn from that sacrifice. And the more we learn from prior sacrifices, would mean that we don't have to repeat that sacrifice. I think we should understand the blessings of life, in my view, outweigh the difficulties of life. Charles knows and Tish knows, I'm always talking about these glasses. One is a clean glass, one is a dirty glass. If we only focus on the dirty glass, no one even know that the clean glass exists. So we have to certainly critique the clean glass and the dirty glass, but we have to also spend, I would say, even more energy on building, erecting, pointing to the clean glass so people have choices. And I think that as we affirm the blessedness of our lives, the blessedness of our culture, the blessedness of our histories, that in my view is very self-motivating, very self-inspirational. And the more we take time to talk to one another, to learn from one another, the more we find out not how different we are, but how similar we are. And it's that similarity, it is that relevance between us that I think gives impulse and buoyancy to the future. And that's what I always focus on.
Okay. Charlie was speaking about suffering. I have to say,
Sacrifice.
sacrifice. I never felt while in prison that I'm sacrificing. In fact, the most enjoyable part of my life is prison. And you understand, I spent many years in solitary confinement. I spent 405 days in the punishing cell. I spent 130 days in hunger strike. So it's not enjoyable, but it's so meaningful. It's the place where you know exactly where is clean glass and where is dirty glass. You know exactly where are your enemies and where are your friends. You have such a moral clarity. You know that you feel yourself very deeply in history. It's so easy to feel solidarity with people who lived thousands of years ago, or even the people who live in the literature. You really understand them. You feel it, the struggle. So you can never reach such moral clarity in politics when you're in the government. Never. So I would not speak about sacrifice. But I believe that all people want meaningful life. They want, of course, some are lucky go to prison. There they find meaningful life. But you cannot expect it from everybody. Meaningful. Well, we saw it now in Israel with all of the at some moment when people see meaning in this defending Israel, how immediately they are mobilized. The number of volunteers is much bigger than the army needs. So, and when young people look for meaningful life, and that's what I'm saying. Oh, you want tikkun olam? If you don't want tikkun olam, you're not Jewish. If you're Jewish, you want tikkun olam, yeah? So, tikkun olam needs a lot of strength, a lot of energy. And you will not find this source of this energy without your roots, without your identity, and at the same time, without feeling how freedom is important. And I think that the moment people feel that, they all want meaning, but they feel that they can reach this meaningful life. So they're becoming much more loyal to the values that we're talking about.
Profoundly said. Thank you. So, on behalf of everybody here, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, Dr. Sharansky, thank you so much for being here.
I'm only